I stood frozen at my brother Nathan's wedding reception as my mother raised her champagne glass, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Your brother's wedding was flawless," Mom said proudly, while the whole family laughed at me. "When will it be your turn? You're nothing but leftover material." I just smiled and replied, "It already happened. You just weren't invited." The entire room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes locked on me as my mother's perfectly lined lips parted in shock. In that moment, the facade my family had maintained for years cracked wide open, revealing the painful truth I had been hiding since that magical night under the northern lights. Growing up in Westbrook, Connecticut, I always felt like an understudy in the play of my own life. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Bennett, had very clear expectations for their children. My younger brother Nathan seemed to meet them effortlessly, while I constantly fell short. "Autumn, why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Nathan was only 2 years younger than me, but he might as well have been from another planet. While I was drawn to art and creativity, spending hours with my sketchbooks and cameras, Nathan excelled at sports, academics, and making our parents beam with pride. Our modest colonial house was a shrine to Nathan's accomplishments. Trophies lined the mantel, ribbons decorated the walls, and framed newspaper clippings of his baseball victories took center stage in the living room. My artwork, when displayed at all, was relegated to the hallway leading to the laundry room. "Art is a nice hobby, Autumn," my mother would say with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes, "but it's not a career path." My father, Richard, was less openly critical but equally dismissive, burying himself in his accounting work and emerging only to cheer at Nathan's games or shake his head at my latest creative pursuit. I still remember my high school senior art show. My photography series on abandoned buildings had won first place, and the local newspaper wanted to interview me. I spent weeks preparing, carefully mounting each photo, writing artist statements, even buying a new dress with my babysitting money. The night of the show arrived, and the gallery was packed with families and community members. Everyone's family, except mine. Mom had called an hour before, her voice dripping with false regret. "Nathan has a championship game tonight, sweetie. We just can't miss it. I'm sure your little pictures will still be there tomorrow." I stood alone among my classmates and their proud parents, accepting congratulations with a practiced smile while my heart crumbled. Later that night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I applied to art schools in New York City, far from the constant comparison and disappointment of home. When my acceptance letter to the prestigious Pratt Institute arrived, my parents were less than thrilled. "New York is dangerous," my mother said, "and so expensive. The community college here has an art program, doesn't it?" Despite their protests, I packed my bags that August. The day I left, my mother hugged me stiffly and said, "When this phase is over, you can always come home." I didn't know then that I was escaping more than just their disapproval. During Christmas break of my freshman year, while searching for extra blankets in my childhood bedroom closet, I discovered a shoebox pushed to the back. Inside were 5 thick envelopes from art schools across the country, all addressed to me, all dated from my senior year of high school, all of them acceptance letters with scholarship offers. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. The Rhode Island School of Design, California Institute of the Arts, School of the Art Institute of Chicago, each one offering financial aid that would have made attendance possible. I confronted my mother in the kitchen as she prepared Christmas dinner. "What are these?" I asked, dropping the stack of opened envelopes on the counter. She barely glanced up from her cranberry sauce. "Oh, those. They came after you'd already decided on Pratt. I didn't see the point in confusing you." The dates on the letters told a different story. They had arrived months before I applied to Pratt, which had been my reach school, my dream that I'd barely dared to hope for. "You hid these from me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane raging inside. "Some of these offered full scholarships." "Autumn, don't be dramatic," she sighed, stirring with more force than necessary. "Those schools were too far away. Your father and I were looking out for your best interests." In that moment, standing in the kitchen that smelled of roasting turkey and betrayal, something broke between us. The fragile hope that they might someday see me, truly see me, evaporated like morning dew. I returned to New York after the holidays with a new understanding of the depth of my mother's control and my father's complicity. That discovery became the fuel that powered me through 4 grueling years at Pratt. Every all-nighter, every critique that left me raw, every side job that barely paid the rent became worth it because I was charting my own course. I was proving them wrong, even if they would never acknowledge it. New York City embraced me in ways my family never had. The city's constant motion, its unapologetic energy, and its celebration of the unconventional felt like home to my artistic soul. But that didn't mean it was easy. For every opportunity, there were 20 rejections. For every step forward, financial reality would push me 2 steps back. My tiny apartment in Brooklyn became my sanctuary and studio. I shared the space with 2 other struggling artists in a converted industrial building where the heat was unreliable and the pipes groaned like tormented ghosts. But the windows were large, flooding my corner with the kind of natural light photographers dream about. After graduation, I cobbled together a living through freelance gigs, waitressing, and the occasional teaching workshop. My photography gradually shifted from artistic abstracts to documentary work, capturing the untold stories of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. 3 years into this precarious existence, my first big break arrived unexpectedly. A series I had done on elderly immigrants in Brooklyn caught the attention of a gallery owner in Chelsea. Amelia Winters had a reputation for discovering raw talent, and somehow she had seen something in my work. "Your images have soul," she told me during our first meeting, her silver hair gleaming under the gallery lights. "They speak to the resilience of the human spirit." The exhibition opened on a rainy Thursday evening. I had invited my family, not expecting them to come, but hoping that perhaps this validation from the art world might finally make them see the legitimacy of my path. The only response I received was a text from Nathan. "Can't make it. Mom and Dad have a charity thing. Good luck." I pushed down the familiar disappointment and focused instead on the gallery filling with New York's art community. Critics circled the room, making notes. Collectors examined price lists. Fellow photographers offered congratulations tinged with friendly envy. And then he walked in. Jack Taylor entered my life like a sudden shift in lighting, changing everything in the frame. Tall with thoughtful brown eyes and an easy smile, he moved through the gallery with confidence, stopping longest in front of my most personal pieces. I watched him from across the room, intrigued by his intense focus. Amelia appeared at my elbow. "That's Jack Taylor," she whispered. "Documentary filmmaker. Just won at Sundance. You should introduce yourself." Before I could protest, she was leading me across the room. "Jack, meet the artist behind these remarkable photographs. Autumn Bennett. This is Jack Taylor." His handshake was warm, his voice deep with a slight rasp. "Your work is extraordinary," he said, still holding my hand a moment longer than necessary, especially the series on Mrs. Chen in her apartment. The way you captured her dignity alongside her circumstances. It's exactly what I try to achieve in my films. We ended up talking until the gallery closed, then continued at a small coffee shop around the corner. Jack told me about growing up in Boston with a father who drank too much and criticized too freely. He wanted me to take over the family construction business, Jack explained, warming his hands around his mug. Every time I picked up a camera instead of a hammer, it was another disappointment I'd served him. "That sounds familiar," I admitted, feeling a strange relief at finding someone who understood. "Did he ever come around?" Jack shook his head. "He died still believing I'd wasted my potential. But I've made peace with that. I had to realize his approval wasn't the measure of my worth." His words resonated in the hollow space inside me that still ached for parental validation. Could I ever reach that level of acceptance? Our connection was immediate and strong. Jack's understanding of my family dynamics came from living his own version of them. Where others had tried to minimize my pain with platitudes, Jack validated it while encouraging me to define success on my own terms. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Our artistic sensibilities complemented each other perfectly. His documentary style influenced my photography, while my eye for composition enhanced his filmmaking. We began collaborating on projects, traveling to forgotten communities across America to document stories that mainstream media overlooked. 6 months into our relationship, we received a joint grant to create a multimedia exhibition on sustainable fishing communities in Alaska. The project would require living in remote villages for several weeks, following the daily lives of families who had fished the same waters for generations. Alaska in early spring was breathtaking. The landscape felt primeval, untouched by the complications of modern life. We stayed in a small cabin near the village of Sitka, waking each morning to views of mountains reflected in still waters. During the days, we worked alongside fishermen and their families, documenting their traditions and struggles. At night, we reviewed footage and images, planning the next day's shoot. On our final evening in Alaska, Jack suggested a hike to a viewpoint known for northern light sightings. The temperature had dropped below freezing, but bundled in layers, we trekked upward through pristine snow. The clearing at the top revealed a panoramic vista of mountains, ocean, and sky. As we stood silently absorbing the majesty, the northern lights appeared, dancing across the sky in ribbons of green and purple. It felt magical, otherworldly, as if we were witnessing something few humans ever truly see. "Autumn," Jack said, his voice barely audible above the wind. When I turned, he was kneeling in the snow, holding up a simple ring with a small, perfect sapphire. "You've shown me what it means to create beauty from pain, to see the world as it is and still find wonder in it. Will you marry me?" The question hung between us in a cloud of frozen breath. In that moment, I saw our lives stretching before us, full of adventure and understanding and mutual respect. Everything my parents' marriage lacked. "Yes," I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks. What happened next surprised even me. "Let's do it tomorrow," I said impulsively. "Here in Alaska. Just us." Jack's eyes widened. "Are you sure? What about your family? A big wedding?" I thought about my mother's inevitable criticism, how she would take over planning and make it about appearances rather than our love, how she would find ways to diminish my choices while appearing supportive to outsiders. "I'm sure," I said with growing conviction. "The only person I need there is you." The next morning, with the help of our local guide, we found a justice of the peace in Sitka. We were married in a small ceremony with 2 local fishermen as witnesses, against a backdrop of mountains and sea. I wore a cream sweater dress purchased from the village's only boutique, with wildflowers in my hair. Jack wore the only suit he had brought for interviews. It was perfectly imperfect, unplanned and magical. As we exchanged vows, I felt a profound sense of freedom. This moment was ours alone, untainted by family expectations or societal pressures. For once in my life, I had made a decision based solely on what brought me joy. We slipped our wedding rings onto chains around our necks, a private symbol of our commitment that we could keep close to our hearts. Our secret marriage became a beautiful bubble of authenticity in lives often compromised by others' expectations. For almost a year, Jack and I kept our marriage private. It wasn't that we were ashamed or uncertain about our decision. Rather, it was a deliberate choice to protect something precious from the inevitable judgments that would come. "Are you ever going to tell your family?" Jack asked one evening as we made dinner in our apartment. We had moved in together shortly after returning from Alaska, finding a larger place in Brooklyn with enough room for both our work and our life together. I chopped vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. "Eventually," I said, "when I'm ready to deal with the fallout." Jack set down the wooden spoon he was using to stir the pasta sauce and came to stand behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You know I support whatever you decide," he said, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I just don't want you to feel like our marriage is something to hide." I turned in his arms. "It's not about hiding us. It's about protecting us. You haven't seen my mother in full critical mode. She'll question everything from why we didn't have a proper wedding to why I didn't change my last name. Which you're still welcome to do, by the way," Jack said with a smile. "I know," I replied, kissing him lightly. But Bennett Taylor is a mouthful for bylines. The truth was more complicated than I was admitting, even to Jack. Keeping our marriage private wasn't just about avoiding criticism. It was about maintaining control over my narrative for the first time in my life. My family had always dictated what success should look like, what relationships were appropriate, what choices were acceptable. This decision was mine alone, made with the man who saw me completely and loved what he saw. We did tell a few close friends, swearing them to secrecy. They understood and celebrated with us during a small dinner party that felt more authentic than any elaborate reception could have been. At family events, we attended as a serious couple but kept our official status to ourselves, rings tucked safely beneath our clothes. During phone calls with my mother, I would listen to her not-so-subtle hints about settling down, responding with non-committal murmurs while Jack made silly faces at me from across the room. "Patty Miller's daughter just got engaged to a surgeon," she would say. "She's younger than you know." "That's nice, Mom," I would reply, rolling my eyes at Jack, who would pretend to swoon. Our life together flourished in this protected space. We continued our collaborative work, gaining recognition in documentary circles. Jack's film about the Alaskan fishing community premiered at several festivals, featuring my still photography in the credits and promotional materials. My exhibition featuring the same community traveled to galleries in 3 cities. We developed routines and traditions, inside jokes, and the kind of shorthand communication that comes with deep intimacy. I had never felt so seen, so accepted, so free to be exactly who I was. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I had been feeling off for a couple of weeks, blaming it on a hectic work schedule and poor eating habits. When I nearly fainted during a photo shoot, Jack insisted I see a doctor. The clinic was sterile and bright, with magazines so old they featured celebrities who had since divorced twice. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and efficient movements, asked routine questions, ordered routine tests. "Let's run a pregnancy test as well," she said casually, "just to rule it out." I laughed. "That's not necessary. We're careful." She shrugged. "It's standard procedure. Better to check everything." I waited in the examination room, scrolling through emails on my phone, making mental notes about upcoming deadlines. When the doctor returned, her expression had softened. "Well, Miss Bennett," she said, glancing at my chart, "it appears congratulations are in order. You're pregnant." The phone slipped from my fingers onto the paper-covered examination table. "That's not possible," I said automatically. "We use protection." "Nothing is 100% effective," she replied gently. "Based on your last period, I'd estimate you're about 7 weeks along." 7 weeks. My mind raced backward, calculating. The night we'd celebrated Jack's film winning at a regional festival, the champagne, the broken condom we had laughed about, assuring each other that one time wouldn't matter. But it had mattered. It had mattered enormously. I left the clinic with prenatal vitamins, pamphlets, and a storm of emotions I couldn't begin to sort through. On the subway ride home, one thought kept circling. I was going to be a mother. I, who had spent a lifetime being told I wasn't enough, would be responsible for making another person feel that they were. The idea terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. When Jack came home that evening, I was sitting at our kitchen table, the prenatal vitamins placed in the center like an art installation. He stopped in the doorway, eyes fixed on the bottle, then moving to my face. "Autumn?" he asked, his voice catching. "Surprise," I said weakly, attempting a smile that wobbled at the edges. Jack crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside my chair and taking my hands in his. "Are we having a baby?" The hope in his voice broke something open inside me. "Yes," I whispered. 7 weeks along. His face transformed with such pure joy that my own fears receded momentarily. He pressed his forehead to our joined hands, shoulders shaking slightly. "Are you crying?" I asked, incredulous. He looked up with wet eyes and the widest smile I'd ever seen. "Happy tears," he assured me. "The happiest." "You're not scared?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But also, Autumn, we made a person. A little person who will have your eyes, and maybe my ridiculous laugh. How is that not the most amazing thing in the world?" His enthusiasm was infectious. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine our child, a perfect blend of us, growing up surrounded by art and love and unconditional acceptance. Then reality crashed back. "My family," I said, the words falling like stones. "I haven't even told them we're married." Jack's expression grew serious. I think it's time, don't you? Before you start showing? I nodded slowly. I need to figure out how to tell them everything at once. The marriage, the baby, they're going to be shocked. And my mother. We'll be getting a grandchild, Jack finished firmly. Whether she approves of how it happened or not. That night, lying awake long after Jack had fallen asleep, his protective hand resting on my still flat stomach, I wrestled with the implications. I was creating my own family now, one built on love and mutual respect rather than criticism and conditional approval. But the echoes of my childhood still haunted me. Could I be a good mother without a blueprint to follow? Could I shield my child from Eleanor's cutting remarks and impossible standards? I made a silent promise to the tiny life growing inside me. You will always know you are enough. You will never question if you are loved. You will be seen for exactly who you are. Now I just had to figure out how to integrate my past with this new future, starting with telling my family the truth. All of it. The news of Nathan's engagement arrived via a group text 2 weeks after I discovered my pregnancy. My mother followed up immediately with a phone call. Did you see? She asked, her voice pitched higher with excitement. Nathan and Heather are engaged. She's absolutely perfect for him. Her father is the senior vice president at First National, you know. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for my brother despite the predictable focus on Heather's pedigree. When did it happen? Last night, Mom gushed. He proposed at Le Bernardin with a 3-carat diamond. Very tasteful. They're thinking June for the wedding. A proper engagement period, not one of these rushed affairs. I bit back a laugh at the irony of her comment, my hand unconsciously moving to the wedding ring now hanging openly around my neck at home. Jack and I had discussed telling my family about our marriage before Nathan's wedding, which suddenly had a timeline. That sounds lovely, I said. I'm happy for them. You'll need to book your flights early, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. June is such a busy travel season. And autumn, dear, perhaps consider getting your hair done professionally for the wedding, something more conventional. I touched my shoulder-length hair, which I'd recently had highlighted with subtle purple streaks. I'll keep that in mind, I replied dryly. And bring Jack, of course. He seems like such a nice young man. Quite successful with his little films, Nathan tells me. Academy Award-nominated little films, I corrected, but she was already moving on. This might be a good opportunity for you two to think about your own future, she said, her voice taking on that familiar, suggestive tone. You're not getting any younger, Autumn. The comment stung, as it was intended to. At 34, I was hardly ancient, but in Eleanor Bennett's world, a woman my age without a wedding ring was dangerously close to expiration. Actually, Mom, about that... Oh, I have to run. The wedding planner is calling. We'll talk soon, darling. The line went dead before I could formulate a response. I stared at the phone in my hand, the moment of courage evaporating. Over the next few months, Nathan's wedding consumed all family communications. My mother transformed into a one-woman planning committee, sending daily updates on venues, florists, menu tastings, and guest lists. Nathan and Heather seemed content to let her take the reins, which didn't surprise me. My brother had always been happy to bask in our mother's approval, even when it came at a cost. Meanwhile, my own news remained unshared. My pregnancy progressed, morning sickness giving way to a small but noticeable bump that I concealed under loose clothing during video calls. Jack and I decided to wait until after the first trimester to share our news with anyone besides our closest friends, but that milestone came and went amid the whirlwind of Nathan's wedding preparations. We need to tell them, Jack said one evening in April. You're starting to show, and I'd rather your family not find out when you suddenly appear at Nathan's wedding with a visible baby bump. He was right. At 16 weeks, my pregnancy was becoming impossible to hide. We decided I would tell them during the upcoming bridal shower, which I was reluctantly attending in Connecticut. The shower was held at an upscale country club, all pastels and peonies and champagne flutes. My mother had insisted I arrive a day early to help with preparations, which meant a night in my childhood bedroom surrounded by remnants of a life that no longer fit. The morning of the shower, I dressed carefully in a flowing navy dress that disguised my changing body, my wedding ring securely on the chain around my neck, hidden beneath my clothing. I had planned to speak privately with my mother before the event, but she was in full hosting mode, directing caterers and arranging gift tables with military precision. "Autumn, there you are," she said when I entered the banquet room. "Be a dear and help finish the place cards. And I've seated you next to Thomas Miller. He's a lawyer now, divorced but no children, very eligible." I froze in the act of adjusting a centerpiece. "You've seated me next to an eligible man? Mom, I'm with Jack. You've met him multiple times." She waved dismissively. "It never hurts to keep your options open. Those creative types can be so unreliable." "Jack and I have been together for 3 years," I reminded her, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "We live together. We're building a life together." "Living together is not a commitment, dear," she replied, lowering her voice as the first guests arrived. "It's a convenience." The shower proceeded like a carefully choreographed performance. Heather opened gifts with appropriate exclamations of delight. Games were played, champagne was consumed, and my mother worked the room like a politician, introducing me to every unattached professional male in attendance. Despite my obvious discomfort, "Eleanor, your daughter has quite the eye," said one of my mother's friends, examining the professional photographs I had taken as an engagement gift for Nathan and Heather. "Such a lovely hobby." "Yes, well, Autumn has always been creative," my mother replied with her practiced smile. "Though we had hoped she'd pursue something more substantial. Her brother is made partner at his firm next month, you know." I excused myself to the restroom, fighting tears of frustration. In the privacy of a bathroom stall, I took several deep breaths, one hand resting protectively over my small bump. "We're going to break this cycle," I whispered to my unborn child. "I promise." When I returned, my mother had corralled me into a conversation with Thomas Miller, who was perfectly nice and clearly as uncomfortable with her matchmaking as I was. After an excruciating 10 minutes, I escaped to the dessert table, where I encountered Heather arranging macarons on her plate. "Sorry about my mother," I said quietly. "She's been in full steamroller mode." Heather smiled sympathetically. "She's certainly enthusiastic," Nathan warned me. She paused, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "He also said you got the worst of it growing up. I want you to know not all of us think your career is just a hobby. I've followed your work since Nathan showed me your gallery website. You're incredibly talented." Her unexpected kindness brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot. And Jack seems wonderful," she added. "Nathan speaks very highly of him." I smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "He is. The best decision I ever made. The moment felt right. Here was someone who might actually be happy for us. Actually, Heather, there's something." "Autumn!" My mother's voice cut through the moment. "Come meet Heather's cousin Andrew. He's a surgeon at Yale New Haven." The opportunity vanished. By the time the shower ended, I was emotionally exhausted and no closer to sharing my news. I returned to New York the next day, having failed in my mission, the weight of unshared secrets growing heavier by the day. The final straw came during Nathan's rehearsal dinner. Jack and I flew to Connecticut the day before, checking into a hotel rather than staying at my parents' house. The dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, another showcase of my parents' social standing. During cocktail hour, I overheard my mother speaking to my Aunt Susan in what she thought was a private corner. "Yes, Autumn's still with that filmmaker," she was saying, her voice tinged with disapproval. "So career-obsessed, both of them. I've given up hope of grandchildren from that quarter. Thank goodness Nathan found Heather. She understands family values." I stood frozen, martini glass in hand, as my mother continued, unaware of my presence. "Between us, I worry about Autumn. 34 and still playing at being an artist. No stability, no real future. Jack seems nice enough, but these creative partnerships rarely last. She'll wake up one day and realize she's missed her chance at a real life." My aunt made some murmured response I couldn't hear. "Oh, I've tried," my mother sighed dramatically. "But you know how headstrong she's always been. Contrary for the sake of being contrary." I've introduced her to so many suitable men, but she insists on doing everything the hard way. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. All these years, I'd assumed my mother simply didn't understand my choices. Now I realized she actively denigrated them behind my back, pitying me to anyone who would listen, undermining my relationship and my career in the same breath. I turned away, bumping directly into Nathan. "Whoa, sis," he said, steadying me. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile, just overwhelmed. Big crowd. He studied me for a moment. "Mom getting to you?" The simple acknowledgement that he recognized our mother's effect on me was surprising. Nathan had always seemed oblivious to the disparity in how we were treated. "Something like that," I admitted. He glanced over my shoulder to where our mother was still talking with Aunt Susan. "Don't let her in your head," he said quietly. "She means well, but she has a very narrow definition of success. For what it's worth, I think you're killing it." Before I could respond, he was called away by Heather. I stood there, processing this small revelation that perhaps my brother wasn't as blind to family dynamics as I'd always assumed. That night in our hotel room, I broke down. Jack held me as I sobbed out my frustration and hurt, the weight of decades of criticism finally overflowing. "I'm tired of hiding," I said finally, wiping my eyes. "I'm tired of feeling ashamed of the life we've built, like it's somehow less valuable because it doesn't fit her template." Jack brushed hair from my damp face. "Then let's stop hiding. Tomorrow at the wedding, wear your ring openly. If they ask, we tell them everything. If they don't, we still know who we are and what we've built." I placed my hand over my small but now noticeable bump. "All of it?" "All of it," he confirmed. "It's time, Autumn. Not just for us, but for this little one. They deserve to be celebrated, not hidden." As we lay in the darkness of that hotel room, I made my decision. The next day at Nathan's wedding, I would finally stand in my truth, whatever the consequences. The morning of Nathan's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if specially ordered by my mother from a high-end weather service. The ceremony was to be held at the Westbrook Yacht Club, a dignified colonial building overlooking the harbor where my father had been a member for 30 years. I woke early, my stomach churning with morning sickness amplified by anxiety. Jack rolled over and kissed my forehead. "Today's the day," he murmured. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But also ready." We had planned to face my family together, presenting a united front as we revealed both our marriage and my pregnancy. But at breakfast, Jack received an urgent call from his producer in New York. "There's a problem with the final edit for the documentary," he explained, pacing our hotel room. "The festival submission deadline is tonight, and the rendering is corrupted. They need me there to fix it." My heart sank. "Today? Now?" He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "I can try to talk them through it remotely, but if it doesn't work." I knew how important this documentary was, the culmination of a year's work and a potential breakthrough for his career. "Go," I said, finding resolve I didn't know I possessed. "I can do this." "Are you sure?" His concern was palpable. "I could skip the ceremony, make it back for the reception." "Jack, it's okay. Really." I touched his face gently. "I've spent my whole life seeking approval I'm never going to get. It's time I stopped needing it." He pulled me close, mindful of my growing belly. "I love you. Both of you. Call me the second it's over, and I'll be there as soon as I can, no matter what." After Jack left for New York, I dressed carefully in the emerald green dress we had chosen together, a color my mother would consider inappropriate for a spring wedding. The fabric draped elegantly over my 17-week bump, not hiding it but not emphasizing it either. Around my neck, I wore my wedding ring on its chain, but today I left it outside my dress, the gold band catching the light. When I arrived at the yacht club, the ceremony preparations were in full swing. White chairs lined the lawn leading down to the water. An elaborate floral arch marked the spot where Nathan and Heather would exchange vows. Staff bustled about with last-minute arrangements while a string quartet tuned their instruments. My mother spotted me as I approached the bridal suite to greet Heather. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my appearance, lingering on my midsection before darting to the ring around my neck. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but she merely pressed her lips together and turned away, directing a waiter carrying champagne flutes. The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Nathan looked genuinely happy as Heather walked down the aisle, and I felt a surge of affection for my brother, despite our complicated history. They had written their own vows, simple but heartfelt declarations that brought tears to my eyes. As they were pronounced husband and wife, I found myself touching my wedding ring, wishing Jack could have been there to squeeze my hand. The reception was held in the club's grand ballroom, transformed by my mother's vision into a springtime fantasy of white roses, crystal, and soft lighting. I was seated at the family table, conspicuously without a +1 since Jack's place setting had been hastily removed upon my arrival alone. My father, always uncomfortable at large social gatherings, made stilted small talk about the weather and the stock market. My mother flitted from table to table, accepting compliments on her planning prowess, occasionally shooting me loaded glances that I pretended not to notice. After the first course, the champagne began flowing freely. The wedding party made toasts, each more effusive than the last about the perfect couple and their bright future. When it came time for the parents' speeches, my father stood awkwardly, reading from note cards a generic blessing that could have applied to any newlywed couple. Then my mother rose, champagne flute in hand, the diamonds on her wrist catching the light. Her speech began conventionally enough, praising Heather's grace and intelligence, Nathan's accomplishments and character. Then she pivoted in a way that made my stomach clench. As parents, there is no greater joy than seeing your children succeed, she said, her gaze sweeping the room before landing pointedly on me. Nathan has always made the right choices, followed the proper path. His wedding today to the lovely Heather is the culmination of a life well planned. Murmurs of approval rippled through the guests. I took a large sip of water, wishing it were something stronger. A mother dreams of days like this, she continued. Richard and I are so blessed to welcome Heather into our family, and to know that Nathan will carry on our family traditions with a proper foundation. The emphasis on proper wasn't subtle. Several relatives glanced my way, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. Your brother's wedding was flawless, she said, now addressing me directly across the table, though her voice projected for the entire room. The assembled guests turned to look at me, many nodding in agreement. When will it be your turn, Autumn? You're not getting any younger, dear. A titter of laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my cheeks flush as dozens of eyes fixed on me. After all, she added with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, you don't want to end up as leftover material, do you? More laughter, louder this time. My Aunt Susan actually snorted into her champagne. My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing, studying the tablecloth with sudden interest. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All the years of diminishment, of carefully constructed criticisms disguised as concern, of being the family disappointment despite my achievements, they crystallized into a single point of clarity. I was done. Done hiding, done apologizing, done seeking approval I would never receive. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The room quieted, perhaps sensing the electric tension in the air. My mother's smile faltered slightly. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It already happened. I pulled the chain from around my neck, slipping the ring off and onto my finger where it belonged. Last year. You just weren't invited. The silence was absolute. My mother's champagne flute hovered halfway to her lips, frozen in shock. My father's head snapped up, eyes wide. I married Jack in Alaska last spring, I continued, my voice gaining strength. It was perfect. Just the two of us, a justice of the peace and the Northern Lights. No grand production, no guest list politics, no months of planning for a single day, just love and commitment. I placed a protective hand over my belly, no longer trying to conceal the small but unmistakable bump. And this November, we're having a baby. The shocked gasps and murmurs felt distant, unimportant. The only reaction I truly registered was my mother's face, cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been hurt before settling into a rigid mask of control. This is hardly the time or place, Autumn, she hissed, her smile still fixed for the benefit of the watching guests. I agree, I replied calmly. I would have preferred to tell you privately. I've tried, actually, several times. But you were always too busy planning the perfect wedding for your perfect son to hear anything about my life. How dare you, she whispered, color draining from her face. This is Nathan's day. Your brother is happy for you. Nathan's voice cut through the tension as he stepped beside me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. Congratulations, sis, he said loudly enough for the entire room to hear. You and Jack deserve all the happiness in the world. My mother's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as Nathan turned to address the stunned guests. My sister has always forged her own path, he said, his arm still around me. It's one of the things I admire most about her, even if I haven't always been brave enough to say so. To Autumn and Jack, and my future niece or nephew. He raised his glass, and after a moment of hesitation, others followed suit. Heather appeared at his side, her smile genuine as she hugged me. I wondered when you were going to tell everyone, she said softly. Nathan told me he suspected when he saw you wearing a ring on a necklace at Christmas. I looked at my brother in astonishment. You knew? He shrugged, a hint of apology in his eyes. I figured you'd say something when you were ready. It wasn't my place to push. As the reception awkwardly resumed around us, my mother disappeared from the room. My father approached cautiously, his expression unreadable. You're really married? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. And pregnant? I nodded, bracing for his disappointment. To my surprise, he enveloped me in a hug, the first real embrace I could remember receiving from him in years. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you better. As he pulled away, I saw the sheen of tears in his eyes. Before I could respond, he turned and went in search of my mother, leaving me standing in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by curious relatives and the wreckage of carefully maintained family fictions. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Jack. How did it go? Should I be on the next train? I typed back quickly. It's done. All of it. Come when you can. I love you. Across the room, Nathan caught my eye and raised his glass again in a private toast. For the first time at a family gathering, I felt seen. Not approved of, perhaps, but acknowledged for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be. It was a start. The aftermath of my revelation at Nathan's wedding unfolded in waves. That evening, after most guests had departed, and the newlyweds had left for their honeymoon suite, I sat alone in the hotel bar, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. The weight of secrets I'd carried for so long had been lifted, replaced by the uncertainty of what would come next. My phone chimed with a text from Jack. On my train now, arriving in 1 hour. Are you okay? I smiled at his concern. Better than expected, I replied. Nathan surprised me. Dad, too. And your mother? He asked. I hesitated. Radio silence. She disappeared after my announcement. Dad went after her. As I typed, my father appeared at the bar entrance, looking exhausted. He spotted me and approached slowly, lowering himself onto the stool beside me with a heavy sigh. Your mother is resting, he said, ordering a scotch with a gesture to the bartender. She's processing. Is that what we're calling it? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, not meeting my eyes. She feels blindsided, Autumn. We both do. I tried to tell her, Dad, multiple times. She never wanted to hear it. He nodded slowly. I believe you, your mother. She has always had very specific ideas about how things should be. When reality doesn't match her vision, she struggles. That doesn't excuse how she's treated me, I said quietly. No, he agreed, surprising me. It doesn't. He took a long sip of his scotch before continuing. I should have stepped in more, between you and your mother. I knew she was harder on you than Nathan, but I told myself it was because she saw your potential and wanted to push you. She didn't see my potential, I corrected him. She saw what she wanted me to be, which was never who I actually was. My father was silent for a long moment. Your announcement today made me realize something, he finally said. I don't really know you, Autumn, the real you. I've been so busy supporting your mother's vision of our family that I missed watching my daughter become the remarkable woman sitting beside me. Tears pricked at my eyes. It's not too late, Dad. He reached over tentatively and covered my hand with his. Tell me about your husband, about your life in New York. I want to know it all. For the next hour, I shared stories about Jack, our work, our travels, our tiny but beloved apartment. I showed him photos on my phone, including our simple wedding in Alaska. He listened attentively, asking questions, expressing genuine interest in aspects of my life he had previously dismissed. "And the baby?" he asked, his voice softening. "How far along are you?" 17 weeks, I said, placing a hand on my small bump, due in November. "A grandchild," he murmured, wonder in his voice. "I never thought. Your mother has been so focused on Nathan and Heather starting a family. Are you disappointed?" I couldn't help asking. "That it happened this way?" He shook his head firmly. "No. I'm sorry that we missed your wedding. That was our loss, not yours. But I'm not disappointed. I'm grateful for another chance." When Jack arrived at the hotel, my father insisted on meeting him properly, as a son-in-law, not just a boyfriend. The two men shook hands, my father apologizing for his previous aloofness and congratulating Jack on both our marriage and the baby. "Take care of them," my father said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Always," Jack promised. "But Autumn doesn't really need taking care of. She's the strongest person I know." My father smiled sadly. She had to be. The next morning, we met my father for breakfast. My mother was notably absent. "She's not ready," my father explained apologetically. "But she will be, eventually. This has been a shock to her system, her carefully ordered world." I nodded, unsurprised, but still disappointed. We said our goodbyes with promises to stay in touch more meaningfully than the occasional holiday call. As Jack and I prepared to return to New York, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. "Autumn, dear, I was hoping to catch you before you left," she said, her voice warm. "I wanted to apologize for laughing yesterday. It was thoughtless." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the gesture. "Your mother has always been." She paused, searching for the right word. "Controlling. Even as children. She needed everything to be perfect, by her definition. When it wasn't, she took it personally." This insight into my mother as a child was unexpected. I didn't know that. "Few do," Aunt Susan replied. "But I wanted you to know you're not the first person she's driven away with her impossible standards. Your Uncle James, my husband, hasn't spoken to her in years because of her criticism of our son's career choices. I had always wondered why Uncle James was so rarely at family gatherings. I had no idea." "She doesn't talk about it," Aunt Susan said. "But after seeing your courage yesterday, I thought you should know you're not alone. Many of us have felt the sting of Eleanor's disapproval. Some of us just learned to stay away." After hanging up, I shared the conversation with Jack. "Sounds like you broke the silence," he observed. "Maybe others will follow." The train ride back to New York was quiet, both of us processing the weekend's events. Back in our apartment, we fell into our familiar routines, but something had shifted. I no longer felt the need to hide or apologize for my choices. For the first time, I had stood in my truth and survived. More than survived, parts of my family had actually rallied around me. A week passed without word from my mother. I sent Nathan and Heather a proper wedding gift with a heartfelt note, thanking them for their support. Nathan called to check in, reporting that our mother was maintaining radio silence about the whole thing, but that he and Heather were excited about the baby and wanted to visit soon. 2 weeks after the wedding, as Jack and I were discussing nursery colors in our tiny spare room, the buzzer for our apartment sounded. It was Saturday afternoon, and we weren't expecting anyone. "Package, maybe?" Jack suggested, pressing the intercom. "Autumn?" My mother's voice, tentative and strained, crackled through the speaker. "It's me. Could I come up, please?" Jack and I exchanged shocked glances. In 3 years, my mother had never once visited our apartment, always insisting we meet at restaurants or hotels when she was in the city. "She's here?" I whispered, suddenly nervous. "Now?" Jack squeezed my hand. "Your call. We can send her away if you're not ready." I took a deep breath. "No. It's time to finish this. one way or another. When my mother stepped into our apartment, she seemed smaller somehow, less formidable. Her hair was impeccable as always, her clothing expensive and tasteful, but there was a fragility to her I had never noticed before. "Thank you for seeing me," she said formally, declining Jack's offer to take her coat. She stood awkwardly in our living room, taking in the photography on the walls, the books stacked on coffee tables, the evidence of our creative, fulfilled life. "Your father told me where you lived." "I hope that's all right." "It's fine," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, perching on the edge of our sofa as if afraid to fully commit to being in our space. While Jack prepared tea in the kitchen, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. My mother's eyes kept darting to my midsection, now more noticeably rounded in the fitted sweater I wore. "How far along are you?" she finally asked. 18 weeks, I replied. "Due November 12th. She nodded slowly. "And you're healthy? The baby is healthy?" "Yes. Everything is progressing normally." Jack returned with tea, setting the tray on the coffee table before discreetly excusing himself to finish some editing, giving us privacy while remaining within earshot. My mother watched him go, a flicker of something like respect crossing her face. "He seems supportive." "He's the best thing that ever happened to me," I said simply. She flinched slightly at my words, staring down at her untouched tea. "I don't know how to do this, Autumn," she admitted quietly. "I don't know how to be the mother of someone who refuses to follow the path I laid out." The honesty of her statement was startling. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mom, but I couldn't live the life you wanted for me. It would have killed something essential in me." "I thought I was protecting you," she said, her voice barely audible. "From struggle, from disappointment, from the messiness of an unconventional life." "I'm not afraid of mess," I told her. "I'm afraid of living without authenticity, without joy." She looked up then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Your Aunt Susan called me, after the wedding. She said some things, hard things, about how I've treated you, about how I've driven people away with my expectations." I waited, giving her space to continue. "And your father. He told me he's tired of watching me push you away. He said if I couldn't accept your choices, I would lose not just you, but him as well." A single tear escaped, tracking down her perfectly made-up face. "I don't know how to change, Autumn, but I don't want to lose my family." The vulnerability in her admission cracked something open in my chest. For the first time, I saw my mother not as an implacable force of criticism, but as a flawed human shaped by her own fears and limitations. "Why have you always been so much harder on me than on Nathan?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since childhood. She wiped away her tear with a manicured finger. "Because you reminded me of myself," she whispered. "The self I buried. I had dreams too once. Of art school, of traveling, of a life less prescribed." This revelation stunned me into silence. My mother, Eleanor Bennett, had wanted to be an artist? My mother, your grandmother, convinced me it was impractical, irresponsible, that I would regret it. So I chose the safe path, the approved path. She gestured vaguely. "And when you showed the same creative spirit, the same restlessness I once had, I panicked. I thought I was saving you from disappointment. By destroying my dreams before they could fail?" I asked, not unkindly. She nodded, shame evident in her expression. "I see now how wrong that was, how selfish." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of misunderstanding and hurt. She asked about our wedding in Alaska, genuinely listening as I described the northern lights and the simple, perfect ceremony. I showed her ultrasound images of her grandchild, watching as her composure crumbled at the tiny profile. "I've missed so much," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to do better, Autumn. I don't know if I can change overnight, but I want to try. For you, for your child, for our family." "It won't be easy," I warned her. "You can't control this narrative, Mom. You can't make it fit your ideal." "I know," she acknowledged. "But perhaps it's time I learned to appreciate a different kind of beauty, a different kind of success." Before she left, My mother asked to see our photography studio in the second bedroom that would soon become a nursery. She studied the equipment, the works in progress, the awards on the wall that she had never acknowledged. "You've built something remarkable," she admitted. "Both of you." It wasn't full acceptance. It wasn't an overnight transformation. But as Jack and I stood in the doorway of our apartment, watching my mother's cab pull away, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: hope. "Do you think she means it?" Jack asked, his arm around my shoulders. "I think she wants to," I replied. And that's a start. 6 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, Jack and I hosted a gathering at our apartment. We had recently moved to a larger place in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up with enough room for a proper nursery and a small home studio. The walls were adorned with our photography and mementos from our travels, creating a space that felt both professional and deeply personal. The occasion was twofold: a small celebration of our marriage for friends and family who hadn't been present in Alaska, and a baby shower for our daughter, due in just 3 weeks. The guest list was intentionally intimate, including only those who had demonstrated genuine support for our unconventional path. Nathan and Heather arrived first, bearing an antique rocking chair that had belonged to our maternal grandmother. "Mom sent this," Nathan explained as Jack helped him maneuver it through the doorway. "She found it in the attic and had it restored." The gesture surprised me. The rocking chair represented a family connection, an acknowledgement of the next generation. It was exactly the kind of sentimental object my mother would typically have saved for Nathan's children. Our closest friends from New York arrived next, filling the apartment with laughter and warmth. Jack's parents drove in from Boston, bringing handmade baby blankets and decades of parenting wisdom offered without expectation or judgment. I was arranging a platter of fruit when the buzzer sounded again. Jack answered, and a moment later, my parents walked through the door. My father carried a large wrapped gift, while my mother clutched her handbag with uncharacteristic nervousness. 6 months had brought gradual but meaningful change. Weekly phone calls had evolved from stilted exchanges to real conversations. My mother had asked questions about my work, actually listening to the answers. She had sent thoughtful gifts for the baby, including books about strong women in history and art supplies for when she's old enough to follow her creative passions. None of this erased the years of criticism or the hurt that still surfaced in unguarded moments. But it represented effort, a genuine attempt to rewrite our relationship on more authentic terms. "Autumn," my mother said, embracing me carefully around my very pregnant belly. "You look radiant." "Thanks, Mom," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "I'm glad you could both make it." "We wouldn't miss it," my father assured me, squeezing my shoulder affectionately before going to shake hands with Jack's father. As guests mingled, I observed my mother with Jack's parents. They were so different: his mother, a former librarian with wild curly hair and colorful clothing, his father a construction foreman with calloused hands and a booming laugh. Yet my mother seemed genuinely engaged in conversation with them, united by the impending arrival of a shared grandchild. Nathan pulled me aside during a quiet moment. "I owe you an apology," he said, his expression serious. "For all those years I didn't see what was happening, how differently we were treated." "You were just a kid, too," I reminded him. "Still," he insisted, "I benefited from her favoritism, and I never challenged it." "I'm sorry, Autumn." I hugged him, this brother who had once seemed to exist in a parallel golden universe. "We're finding our way now. That's what matters." After a casual lunch, we gathered in the living room for a toast. Jack stood beside me, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "When Autumn and I married last year under the Northern Lights, it was perfect for us, but we missed sharing that moment with the people we love. Today feels like completing that circle." My mother, seated beside my father on our sofa, dabbed discreetly at her eyes. "And as we prepare to welcome our daughter," Jack continued, his voice thick with emotion, "we're grateful she'll be born into this circle of love and acceptance." I squeezed his hand, too moved to speak. Looking around the room at the faces of those who had chosen to love us exactly as we were, I felt a profound sense of peace. The family I had yearned for as a child had finally materialized, not in the form I had expected, but in a constellation of relationships built on genuine understanding rather than obligation. Later, as guests began to depart, my mother lingered, helping to gather dishes despite my protests that she should relax. "I want to show you something," she said, reaching into her handbag. She withdrew a small, worn sketchbook and handed it to me. "I found this when we were cleaning out the attic." I opened it carefully. Inside were delicate watercolor paintings, landscapes, and portraits that revealed genuine talent and a sensitive eye for detail. The signature in the corner read Eleanor Martin, my mother's maiden name. "You painted these?" I asked, turning pages with growing amazement. She nodded, a wistful smile playing at her lips. Before I convinced myself it was impractical, before I became so focused on doing everything right that I forgot what brought me joy. I studied a particularly beautiful rendering of a young woman reading by a window, the light capturing her absorbed expression. "These are wonderful, Mom. I've signed up for an art class," she confessed, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "At the community center. Just once a week. Your father thinks it's a wonderful idea." The image of my proper, perfectionist mother at an easel, embracing the messiness of creativity, was almost too extraordinary to contemplate. Yet here was evidence of her effort to reconnect with the self she had buried, the self that might better understand her daughter. "I'm proud of you," I told her, the words feeling strange yet right on my tongue. She looked startled, then touched, unaccustomed to praise from the child she had so rarely praised. "I'm trying, Autumn. I can't promise I won't slip sometimes, fall back into old patterns, but I'm trying. That's all any of us can do," I said softly. After our guests had gone, Jack and I collapsed onto the sofa, feet propped on the coffee table, surveying the cheerful disarray of our apartment. The rocking chair from my grandmother sat in the corner, already looking as if it belonged. The walls held photographs of our journey together, including a new family portrait taken that day, all 3 generations together. "That went better than I expected," Jack said, his arm around my shoulders. I leaned against him, feeling our daughter kick energetically. My mother using the word wonderful to describe my photography. Nathan apologizing for his part in the family dynamic. "I'm still processing." "People can surprise you," Jack observed, sometimes even in good ways. 3 weeks later, our daughter Emma Grace Taylor entered the world after 22 hours of labor. She had my eyes, Jack's chin, and a determined spirit that made itself known from her first powerful cry. My parents arrived at the hospital the following day, my mother bearing a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "For Emma," she said, placing it on the bed beside me. "And for you." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a camera on one side and a paintbrush on the other. "To remind her that creativity runs in her blood," my mother explained, "on both sides." As she held her granddaughter for the first time, I watched my mother's face soften, the carefully maintained facade of perfection giving way to genuine wonder. "She's extraordinary," she whispered. "She is," I agreed. "And she'll find her own path, whatever that might be." My mother met my eyes, understanding the gentle boundary being established, and will be here to support her, no matter what she chooses. In that hospital room, holding my daughter while surrounded by the family I had both been born into and chosen, I realized that the journey had never been about gaining my mother's approval. It had been about finding the courage to approve of myself, to trust my own instincts, to build a life authentic to my values, rather than inherited expectations. The cycle of criticism and conditional love that had shaped my childhood would end with me. Emma would grow up knowing she was enough, exactly as she was. She would be encouraged to explore, to create, to follow her curiosity wherever it led. She would understand that family meant acceptance, not performance. As I watch Emma sleeping in her crib tonight, nearly a month old, and already so distinct in her preferences and expressions, I marvel at the journey that brought us here. The pain of never quite measuring up, the courage to forge my own path despite disapproval, the joy of finding a partner who sees me completely, the difficult reconciliation with my family, all of it has shaped me into the mother I want to be for her. Life doesn't follow a perfect script. Relationships aren't mended overnight. But in choosing authenticity over approval, In standing firmly in my truth at my brother's wedding, I found an unexpected path to healing. Not the fairy tale version where all is magically resolved, but the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of family learning to love better, one difficult conversation at a time. Emma stirs in her sleep, her tiny hand curling around my finger with surprising strength. In her grip, I feel the promise of a new generation, one raised to value authenticity over appearance, creativity over conformity, love over achievement. Some family traditions are worth keeping. Others deserve to be gently but firmly laid to rest. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference. What family traditions or expectations have you had to break free from to live authentically? Have you ever had to make a difficult stand to protect your own happiness? Comment below with your experiences, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to stand in your truth, even when the room falls silent.